I heard this story from a coworker who used to live in a small town just outside Minneapolis. He swore up and down it really happened to his sister's family. And honestly, the way he told it, I believed him. Even if you don't, you'll see why it stuck with me. So this couple, Matt and Jenny, had been renting apartments for years while saving up for a house. Finally, they bought a modest 3-bedroom place on a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of neighborhood where everyone waves when you drive by and kids ride bikes until dark. Their son Ethan was 6 and their daughter Lily was 4. They were excited to give them a backyard to play in. The house was fine, maybe a little dated, but they loved it. The only thing that struck them as odd was their next-door neighbor, Mr. Lawson. He must have been in his 70s, living alone. The first day they moved in, he nodded politely but didn't introduce himself. They assumed he was just private. Matt noticed that every night around 10, the garage light would come on. It wasn't like Mr. Lawson was doing handyman stuff. No hammering, no engine noises, just a faint shuffling sound. Some nights it went on for hours. Other nights it lasted 20 minutes. At first, Matt thought nothing of it. Retired people have their quirks. Maybe the guy was sorting old junk. But after a while, Jenny started to get uneasy. One evening, she came inside after taking out the trash and said she could hear someone crying through the thin wall between their driveways. Matt shrugged it off, said maybe the TV was on. But it wasn't the TV. She was sure of it. A couple of weeks later, Jenny was watering the flowers by the fence when she noticed Mr. Lawson standing just inside his garage with the door cracked open. He was staring at her, not moving. She tried to wave and he turned away without acknowledgement. Again, Matt told her not to overthink it. But Jenny couldn't shake the feeling. She started closing the curtains in the kitchen after dark. Things escalated about a month later. It was a Sunday afternoon, bright and sunny. Ethan and Lily were playing in the yard while Jenny cleaned up the breakfast dishes. She glanced out the window and saw Mr. Lawson by the fence, holding something up. It was a camera. He was taking photos of the kids. Jenny ran outside, heart hammering. By the time she reached the fence, he was gone. Back into his house, the door shut. She called Matt, who came home right away. He knocked on Mr. Lawson's door, ready to confront him. No answer. He knocked again. Nothing. They debated calling the police, but felt silly. What could they say? Our neighbor looked at us and took pictures. No crime in that. Still, it left them shaken. Matt installed a security camera pointing toward the fence. The first few nights, nothing happened. But on the 5th night, around 2 a.m., the camera picked up movement. Mr. Lawson was standing at the fence again, just standing there facing their house, for nearly an hour. Matt saved the footage, showed it to the police. An officer came out, talked to them, then went over to Mr. Lawson's place. After about 20 minutes, the officer came back and said the old man claimed he was just out getting air and liked walking in his yard at night. It's unsettling, but not illegal, the officer said. Call us if he comes onto your property. Matt and Jenny were frustrated. They put up a taller wooden fence. For a while it helped. Weeks passed with no incidents. Then, late in October, Ethan came inside one afternoon holding a small toy truck. Look what Mr. Lawson gave me, he said. Jenny's stomach dropped. She asked when he'd seen him. Ethan said, just now. He called me over to the fence. Matt drove straight to the station with the footage and the toy. The police said again that unless Mr. Lawson crossed onto their property or threatened them, there wasn't much they could do. Jenny started having nightmares about the garage light. She'd wake Matt up, convinced she heard crying. He tried to reassure her, but he was starting to feel it too. The sense that something was off, like a bad smell you couldn't find. By November, they were actively looking for another house, even if it meant stretching their budget. Jenny said she didn't care if they lost money. She just wanted to leave. And then, right before Thanksgiving, something happened that no one could explain away. One night, Matt woke up to the sound of footsteps on gravel. He got up, went to the window, and saw Mr. Lawson in their yard near the kids' playhouse. He was holding what looked like a small flashlight. Matt ran downstairs out the back door, but by the time he got there, Mr. Lawson was gone. Just gone like he'd vanished into the dark. The next morning, they called the police again. An officer searched the yard and found footprints leading up to the playhouse and back to the fence. Nothing was stolen or broken. But Jenny was done. She called a realtor that afternoon. They planned to list the house after the holidays. Over the next few weeks, things stayed quiet. Almost too quiet. Matt and Jenny tried to act normal for the kids. But every night when the sun went down, they felt that same tension settle over the house. They kept the curtains shut, the doors locked. Matt installed a motion sensor light facing the backyard. He also added another camera, one that covered the corner near the kids' playhouse. Jenny started parking her car in the garage instead of the driveway just to feel a little safer. Thanksgiving came and went. They didn't invite anyone over. They told family they were busy, that maybe they'd visit after New Year's. In reality, they just didn't want anyone to see how anxious they were. In early December, Matt checked the security footage every morning, almost on autopilot. For a while, there was nothing unusual, just raccoons, the neighbor's cat. Then, one morning, he noticed the motion light had triggered around 3:15 a.m. He pulled up the clip. It showed Mr. Lawson walking slowly across their yard, stopping by the kids' swing set and standing there. He was holding something, maybe a book or a box. He didn't move for a full 2 minutes, just stood there in the cold, staring at the swings. When Matt showed Jenny, she started crying. She didn't even try to hide it from Ethan and Lily. She was exhausted, scared, and angry all at once. Matt printed still frames from the video and drove them to the police station himself. The officer on duty promised to make contact again, but said unless Mr. Lawson committed a crime, they were limited in what they could do. A few weeks after they moved out, Matt sometimes wondered if they'd overreacted. If maybe Mr. Lawson really was just a lonely old man stuck in some endless cycle of grief. But even when he tried to think of it that way, he still felt the skin on his arms prickle at the memory of that garage and those photographs pinned neatly in rows. They rented a smaller house in a neighboring town. It wasn't perfect. 2 bedrooms instead of 3, no fenced backyard. But Jenny said she'd rather be a little cramped than ever feel that fear again. For a while, life got quieter. Ethan and Lily settled into their new school. Jenny started sleeping through the night, and Matt felt like maybe they'd finally left that darkness behind. Then about 6 months later, they got a letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded neatly in thirds. "You were right to leave," it said in a thin, shaky handwriting. "But it won't change anything." Nothing else. Jenny was the one who read it first. When Matt came home, she was sitting at the kitchen table, the letter in front of her, hands clenched in her lap. He recognized the handwriting instantly. They called the police again. The officer on the phone told them there was no way to prove who had sent it, though privately he admitted it sounded like Mr. Lawson. That night, neither of them slept much. Every creak of the floorboards, every car driving by outside made Matt feel like the world was still watching them somehow. A few days later, Jenny took the kids to visit her parents upstate. Matt stayed behind for work. He didn't mind the quiet, or at least he told himself he didn't. On the third night alone, he woke up around 2 a.m., his heart already hammering. He didn't know why at first. Then he realized he was listening, straining for a sound he couldn't quite place. It took him a few seconds to notice the motion sensor light out back was on. He got up slowly, walked to the kitchen window. There, standing by the chain-link fence at the edge of the property, was Mr. Lawson. Matt froze. He watched as the old man turned, just enough to look straight at the house. He wasn't holding anything this time. He wasn't moving, just standing there. Matt's first impulse was to call the police, but something stopped him. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was some twisted empathy. He couldn't say. He went to the back door and stepped outside. The air was cold, damp. He could feel his breath in front of him. He walked halfway across the yard and stopped. "You need to leave," he called. "This isn't your place anymore." Mr. Lawson didn't answer. Matt took another step closer. He could see how thin he looked, how his shoulders slumped. "What do you want from us?" Matt asked. For a long time, there was only the sound of distant traffic. Then Mr. Lawson lifted one hand and pointed past Matt toward the house. "You don't understand," he said, voice raspy. "It never stops." Matt's chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" "The watching," Mr. Lawson said softly. "Even when you leave, it follows you." Matt felt a chill run down his spine. He took a step back. "I'm going to call someone," he said. Mr. Lawson didn't respond. He slowly turned and walked away into the shadows between the houses. Matt stood there a long time before going back inside. The next morning, he drove to the old neighborhood. He didn't really know why. Maybe he wanted to see for himself that it was over. When he pulled up, he saw the for sale sign still in front of Mr. Lawson's house. The garage door was open. 2 squad cars were parked out front. Matt's stomach dropped. He parked and walked over. A young officer stopped him and asked what he was doing there. "I used to live next door," Matt said. "Is he okay?" The officer hesitated, then shook his head. "They found him in the garage," he said quietly. "Looks like he passed sometime last night." Matt felt something twist inside him. Relief and guilt and something else he couldn't name. "Did he leave anything?" he asked. The officer looked puzzled. "Like what?" "Never mind," Matt said. He thanked the officer and left. On the drive home, he tried to feel sorry for Mr. Lawson. He tried to imagine what it must have been like to live with that kind of grief for decades, but all he could think about was that last thing the old man had said. It never stops. For months after, Matt would wake in the middle of the night, convinced he saw someone standing in the yard. Sometimes it was nothing, just a tree limb shifting in the wind. Other times he was less sure. He never told Jenny about those nights. When they finally bought a new house, farther out in the country, he hoped that would be the end of it. But even years later, when the kids were teenagers and Mr. Lawson was long gone, Matt still caught himself checking the backyard before he locked up for the night. Not because he thought Mr. Lawson would be there, but because he'd started to wonder if maybe the old man was right. Some things follow you no matter where you go. And sometimes, even when you think you've left the darkness behind, it's still waiting at the edge of the yard, watching. When Matt got home, Jenny was already packing. Not everything, just essentials, enough to stay at her sister's house for a while. She said she couldn't spend one more night in that place. Matt didn't argue. That evening, they explained to the kids that they were going to have a little vacation with Aunt Laura. Ethan looked worried but didn't ask questions. Lily seemed too young to understand. Matt stayed behind to keep an eye on the house until they could finalize listing it. He tried to be rational, telling himself maybe Mr. Lawson had dementia, maybe he was lonely, maybe he didn't realize how frightening his behavior was. But the truth was, every time he pictured that man standing by the swings, he felt a cold weight in his chest. On the third night alone, Matt couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m. he decided to look out the window. The garage light next door was on as usual, but for the first time, the side door was wide open. Matt hesitated. Part of him wanted to close the blinds and pretend he hadn't seen anything, but curiosity, or maybe desperation, won out. He put on his coat and stepped outside, crossing the lawn to the low fence. "Mr. Lawson?" he called softly. No answer. He took a step closer, peering through the open garage door. The space inside was cluttered but neatly arranged. Shelves stacked with boxes, an old workbench, a folding chair, and on the far wall, dozens of photographs were pinned up. Matt couldn't see them clearly from where he stood, but he could tell they were all of children. Some black and white, some faded color prints. His stomach turned. He thought about going back to call the police, but something pulled him closer. He stepped into the garage. The smell hit him first. Dust and mildew and something else, something metallic. The air felt heavier inside. He approached the wall of photos, heart thudding so hard he thought he might pass out. Most of the pictures were old, kids he didn't recognize. But near the bottom, tacked up in a neat row, were photos of Ethan and Lily. One of them was from the day they'd moved in, Ethan holding a box, grinning at the camera. Another was from Halloween, Lily in her princess costume. The most recent looked like it had been taken just days earlier. Matt staggered back, nearly knocking over a stack of boxes. His vision blurred with panic. He turned to leave, and saw Mr. Lawson standing just outside the door, blocking the way out. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The old man's expression was blank, almost serene. "You shouldn't be here," Mr. Lawson said finally, his voice low and tired. Matt tried to keep his voice steady. "Why are you taking pictures of my children?" Mr. Lawson didn't answer right away. He looked past Matt at the wall of photographs. "I keep them because I don't want to forget," he said quietly. "Because someone has to remember." Matt didn't know what to say. He took another step back, careful not to turn his back completely. "What does that mean?" he demanded. Mr. Lawson sighed. "You wouldn't understand." Matt felt something snap inside him. "Try me." The old man closed his eyes for a moment like he was gathering strength. "My daughter," he said finally. "She was taken from this yard. Right there." He gestured past Matt toward the swings. 40 years ago. She was 6. No one ever found her. Matt swallowed hard. He didn't know if he believed him. But the sadness in Mr. Lawson's face didn't look like an act. "I watch the children," Mr. Lawson continued, "because maybe if I'm watching it won't happen again." Matt felt his legs go weak. He thought of all the nights the man had stood by the fence. "I never meant to frighten you," Mr. Lawson whispered. "I'm just making sure." They stood in silence for a long time. Then Matt stepped past him out into the cold. He didn't look back. He called the police again, reported everything. This time they promised to assign someone to check in on Mr. Lawson more regularly. But still no laws had been broken. The next morning, Matt packed up the rest of their things. When Jenny and the kids returned to say goodbye to the house, he didn't tell them everything he'd seen, just enough so they'd understand why they were leaving. They closed on the sale a month later. Thank you for listening. Until the next heartbeat in a story. Subscribe and stay for more love in every word.